I'm DJ.
And I'm Andrew.
Welcome to One Shot Stab,
a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. Today, we are joined by Cody Podsmith of R, Talsorian Games, creator of the Witcher TTRPG, and a brand new system and setting that we are talking about today, Shadowscar. Cody, thank you for being with us.
I'm happy to be here. I'm glad to be had.
So we'll get the elephant in the room out of the way first. Your father is Mike Pondsmith, correct?
That is correct.
Obviously, for those of you who are listening at home, if you are big cyberpunk fans, Mike Pondsmith is that guy.
We start there not because, oh, you are just your dad's kid, but it's always interesting when it comes to working and talking to creators about what got them into the hobby and where somebody entered into creating a TTRPG. I think it's worth note only because with being the son of a creator that's very well known in the space that has done some really amazing things, and now you stepping into those shoes and doing a lot of that yourself, can you give us, however deep you want to go, your kind of background in growing up in gaming and what made you go like, I do want to do this as well. This is something that I want to make about myself, not just something that I grew up around.
So it's kind of interesting because when I was growing up, I remember Mike was not working with Talsorian at that time. He was working with Microsoft and then later DigiPen teaching game design. And so I didn't really initially grow up with the company. When I was born and when I was a toddler, the company was around. And they have plenty of stories of me wandering around the office, toddling around or whatever. But when I kind of came into my own as far as, really having opinions and things like that, the company was not active. I actually came upon one of our games, Teenagers from Outer Space, when I was quite a bit younger. I went to Mike and basically said, hey, I found this cool thing we did. Would you run this? I think I was like 10 or 11. Actually, I may have been 8 or 9. He got together a teenagers game with all my friends. That was my first introduction to RPGs through this, family game run by my dad. And through time, that kind of expanded. I went from teenagers to I wound up playing a cyberpunk game, probably way sooner than I probably should have, and kind of became more aware of the company and what Mike and Lisa had done those years before and were getting back into doing. I had experiences with it, both in sort of playing in games, running like the most rudimentary, like barely there games. Like I ran a Pokemon themed game when I was 10 with my parents. I kind of very solidly grew up in it, but I was also able to kind of interface with the company when I was older because we came back out of hibernation.
Right.
And granted, that was with Cyberpunk version 3, which I had like a little bit of a hand in actually putting together. I was kind of there for this revival of Talsorian in a weird sort of way.
This is about Shadowscar. It is about the game that you told me at Gen Con that you have been working on and writing since you were young. I know that somebody out there listening would be like, oh, I really want to hear about that. So they get to hear about that part. But now we want to hear about you.
Yeah.
We want to hear about the inspirations behind Shadowscar. For the listeners, Shadowscar gave me so many interesting vibes. Here, I could just list them out. It gives me Naruto meets Time Bandits meets Stargate meets like Supernatural Cop. Like it's so many things that are integral to my own childhood and upbringing that it immediately grabbed me.
So Shadowscar is a culmination of like years of me growing up. I first came up with the concept with a friend of mine at a sleepover when I was 11. We were staying up all night playing Naruto Ultimate Ninja 1 on the PlayStation 2 and had this idea, what if we made a Naruto role-playing game? We started on it with lots of passion, but very little experience in game design. Basically none. And that actually, unsurprisingly, fizzled out very quickly. We had no context for it. We had never done game design before because we were like 11. But that idea I carried forward over the next several years. I like to say that Shadowscar kind of grew up with me. At different points in my life, I was working on different eras of the game. After it was a Naruto role-playing game, it became more of like, it still had those Naruto-esque aspects. It had elemental-themed clans and all the jutsu and things like that. Eventually, when I got older and I was in my teens, it evolved into a ninja high school type game. It went back to being a much more grounded fantasy Japan game. It went through all these iterations until we got to the one that it is now, with the addition of the multiple dimension aspect, which I played around with in games that I was running in, running my own with my own gaming group in my late teens. I decided I wanted to do this for real. I went to Mike and I gave him the pitch. He critiqued a lot of stuff, but one of the things he said was like, okay, that multidimensional aspect is actually really cool, so you should lean into that, as much as you can. So I did, and I basically took all of these concepts that I was running in my home game and just slammed them full force into the game as it was developing, which kind of sort of brings it to where it is now. So, over the years, it of course initially started out very heavily inspired by Naruto. It brought in aspects like Soul Eater, a bit of Bleach. I kind of, as it evolved, it brought in things like Men in Black, a little bit of Stargate, and a lot of those inspirations were things that I encountered and took bits of to put into Shadowscar. It has organically grown over time into what it is now.
Right. That's awesome. And we talk about it all the time here with different creators, but the touchstones that people choose to utilize when creating these games are wildly diverse. I don't think I've played a Naruto inspired game. Not that it's wild that exists at all, but like, I don't think I've done that yet. When I look at Shadowscar, having not necessarily gotten under the hood just yet, but understanding a lot of those influences and going, okay, hold on a second, I haven't done that yet. There's so many times where we're playing games, we're comfortable, we're used to the same thing, and then maybe somebody runs a different genre, runs a different setting, runs a different system, and you go, oh wait, hold on a second, all I've been doing is throwing around fireballs. I haven't been a teenager from outer space yet. I haven't been a Naruto ninja traveling dimensions and wiping people's memory as they've seen something horrible. I haven't blended Men in Black with that. And it just it facilitates something fundamentally different. So when you look at the touchstones that you pulled from, you mentioned Naruto, you mentioned Men in Black, you mentioned a lot of those, but like, what out of those stories for you carries the most meaning and like carries like the most of like the essence of what this game ends up about? What kind of stories does this facilitate and tell really well that's important to you?
So I think of Shadowscar as like a spy thriller. With all of the ninjas, the multidimensional aspects, the yokai and everything, all of it exists to facilitate this spy thriller concept where you are playing highly trained agents of a secret organization. You're being sent out on missions to find sleeper cell agents of another evil organization. And, you're traveling between these worlds and having to go undercover and, work in the shadows to defend the light. That's how I usually think of it and what the core of Shadowscar is to me. It is this spy versus spy thriller that can take different forms because of the different worlds it takes place in and the different monsters that you can fight and what you get for being part of different clans.
Can we jump into some of that with the worlds? What are the options for who I get to embody when I'm playing Shadowscar? Is it exclusively ninjas? Or what is the breadth of options when it comes to character creation and getting into this game?
So, you are ninjas. You are part of the Shadowscar agency. You start out with your homeland, which is where your character actually comes from. There are 4 worlds in Shadowscar at the moment. Plans to expand later, but wanted to stay within the boundaries for the first book. There is Nakatsukuni, which is the homeland of the agency and kind of where all this conflict started It is this sort of early 17th century Japanese setting where all of the magic and monsters are all real, and this 100-year war has taken place between the gods and the afterlife itself. There is Steel Court, which is the first of the infected dimensions that have been infected by yokai and are now being kind of eaten from the inside out. Steel Court being a 19th century sort of steampunk Victoriana type setting where the countries of Europe especially have kind of galvanized into these massive empires that are vying for territory and pushing each other's boundaries and using this somewhat fantastical steampunk technology to do so. Fifth Street, which is one of the most complicated dimensions. It is a 1920s American setting where you are dealing with mobsters and cops and prohibitionists, but at the same time, it is this over-the-top, almost Pulp Fiction style world where the world itself has what's called the narrative, which is a invisible force that pushes the world to and fro to make good stories and story moments. So the world will actually react to the things that you're doing, changing the environment to highlight the mood of a moment, or having things going on in the background as every person in Fifth Street is living their own movie. This means that you have Dick Tracy style mobsters and Cape Crusader type superheroes and things like that.
Wow.
And then the last world is Refuge, which is the hardest hit by the yokai being pushed out of Nikatsukuni. It is a near future setting where the Earth has been blighted by something that the yokai were able to do, and the last remaining human survivors are on the Eos space station and the Selene colony on the moon. You are basically playing the last survivors of the human race living on a space station and a lunar colony, trying to find out how they're going to survive and what they're going to do now that Earth has been made uninhabitable.
Wow.
Yeah, I absolutely love everything you've talked about. Like, just going through the starter set and the art and these world genre themes. One of my favorite things is the 9 hand seals.
Yes.
As a gameplay mechanic, which I think is incredibly unique in a TTRPG to have these, obviously the inspiration, as you mentioned, having the jutsu from Naruto. I think that's really cool. Tell me about your inclusion of that and how the jutsus work.
It's interesting because it's evolved a lot and not at all at the same time. Shadowscar has always had something jutsu adjacent because I wanted to get that cool ninja magic in there.
Right.
But a lot of that evolved as I kind of interfaced with the concepts on a more realistic based interaction. So for instance, I went and I found the Ketsuin, which are the 9 hand seals, and learned about their inspiration farther abroad and then bringing them into Japan and how they were sort of used in that context, including like what the actual ones are. The nine established ones got a lot of hand seals in Naruto, but not all of them were original. From there, I pulled from Naruto, augmented by bits of real world spiritual belief. We have concepts of ki, life energy that you are using to power these forms of magic, these mikyo. The concept that it flows through your body and gathers in certain places within your body, which is effectively the and then this concept that the hand seals are there as a muscle memory situation. So technically you don't have to make hand seals, but they are taught to you in training so that you associate a specific mikyo with a specific hand seal. That makes it easier for you to focus your mind and your energy into performing that mikyo.
So I got a question. With building out Shadowscar, it sounds like you started with the world first, and then were you running a version of Shadowscar, at least in its more Naruto-ified version early on, was that running off of another system? And at what point did you shift in terms of mechanics to developing something unique for the system?
Originally, it was run off of Fusion, one of our house systems. Stat skill, die roll, all that jazz. Running entirely off of D10s and D6s for damage resolution. It stayed like that for quite a long time, actually. It only really changed when I started really seriously moving to create Shadowscar as its own, like, property for publishing a couple years ago. Everything that went into creating that new system was me wanting to create a system that was as approachable as possible while still having enough crunch to adjudicate certain aspects of the game. I often find it hard to use system light games because they leave a lot of adjudication to the game master's general choice, which can be good if you have a good game master and bad if you don't. So I always prefer to have more rules rather than less, because that makes it easier for someone who's not a great game master to still run a great game. It doesn't have as much of a learning curve in one respect, as long as you are comfortable with the rules.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's why we use the D6 dice pool. That's why a lot of the numbers are kept very small. They are deliberate choices to make a game that almost anybody can pick up and play. Maybe not immediately,
Yeah,
but with a little bit of training.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting when it comes to setting first systems where somebody's developing the story first and then allows their mechanics to fall alongside that. I'm interested in taking this thing for a spin because I love it when the actual engine is built to facilitate that exact flavor. A very common example that people deal with is 5e, and it's like 5th edition D&D was built, you know, on top of Faerun, high fantasy. It was built to do a lot of stuff, good or bad. But the problem is when you're trying to be good at everything, you end up kind of being okay at most of it, as opposed to really specialized in a flavor and a setting and facilitating something special. I'm excited mainly because of that, because you were able to develop your world with mechanics to continue playing it as a game. But then you were able to go, okay, let's take this, let's decouple it, and build something that is core to the identity of the setting, core to the identity of this type of story that we're trying to tell. When it comes to your mechanics, and maybe it's the hand seals that we were just talking about, but when it comes to the mechanics, what is something that comes to mind first with the heart of the game, the heart of the tone, the setting, all of that stuff that comes through in a mechanical way?
It would have to be the assassination mechanic. The goal on this game was to make it a stealth strategy game. The goal was to create something that wasn't a combat simulator. It could do combat, but something that really prioritized infiltration, stealth, and remaining unseen as much as possible. A lot of thoughts go into that, but the biggest is the assassination mechanic, which was heavily inspired by the Tenchu video games. I found in other games that there is not a really good way to be a stealth assassin. Usually you don't do enough damage when you do attack. You run behind somebody and stab them in the back, and you do a certain amount of hit points, and then they turn around and hit you because you didn't kill them. I wanted something that was immediate, powerful, and stealth focused. Basically, if you get the drop on someone, you can kill them.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to roll to do it, but you can just outright kill them. This allows you to deal with guards stopping you from getting to your target. It allows you to assassinate your target quickly and kind of without alerting anybody. And it takes the game into not only a stealth-focused direction, but a stealth and counter-stealth direction. The assassination mechanic allows you, if you snuck up on somebody, to make a stealth check against their awareness skill base to just outright kill them. If you succeed, you kill them. Nobody is aware. You just kill them outright. If you fail, you do no damage, and everyone in the area is aware that something just happened because the person cries out or calls for help or there's a scuffle.
Yeah.
This allows you to really focus on sneaking up on your opponents, finding ways around them. But the trade-off is that these rules work for both sides, which if you're not careful, you can be assassinated just like you would assassinate someone else.
That's awesome.
So it facilitates not only trying to think stealthy, but trying to think or be aware of what your enemy might be doing around you.
With assassinations comes the talk of how death is handled within Shadowscar, because there's a couple of like unique things about this. There's death, wandering as a spirit, and then just game over, your character's gone. With the wandering as a spirit thing, there's a part that I particularly noted about the spirit lanterns, and capturing those wandering spirits. It feels like a fun Ghostbustery mechanic to prevent your friends from dying, and I love it.
So when you die in Shadowscar, you are forced out of your body and you become a wandering spirit. You are existing in the spirit world, which is sort of parallel to the material world. You can see everything going on in the material world, but you can't interact with anything unless you have a specific ability.
There's always an exception.
Yeah. In the spirit world, we wanted to make it so that even if you died, you had something you can do. In the spirit world, your biggest threat is that your key reserve, which is the thing that's keeping you alive in the spirit world, is constantly ticking down. However, you can replenish that by recovering. So you can stay alive for quite a long time as long as you focus on keeping yourself there and present in the spirit world. As you are dead, you can do things like spy on the enemy from the spirit world. You can negotiate with minor spirits. You have a lot of options, but most circumstances, you are going to wind up in a spirit lantern. Every team has one spirit lantern when they depart on a mission. It is this little, usually granite and metal lantern that has a little sort of toggle on the top that you click down and opens this aperture in the lantern. And it can then be used to draw a spirit from the spirit world into the lantern, containing it theoretically indefinitely. This is used in two aspects in the agency. The first being to keep agents from dying permanently, keep them from suffering true death, at which point their soul goes away and in most circumstances goes to Yomi no Kuni, which is the afterlife, which is corrupted, and your soul can wind up being turned into a horrible monster that will then work to the enemy's advantage. But at the same time, you can use spirit lanterns to capture the spirits of enemy agents to take them back for interrogation. When you're playing with players, your character's death is not permanent. If they die on a mission, they can, and you get the soul and you get the body, hopefully, you can take them back to the agency headquarters and they can be resurrected by the gods and by the sort of priests and attendants who work in the agency. So there's always an out. As long as you can get your body and get your spirit, technically body's optional, but it costs a lot to make a new body. You can have your character resurrected. The fun part that we don't talk about in the starter set, that we only really hint at in core book even, is that spirit lanterns can contain spirits indefinitely. And since it's well known that spirits who suffer true death usually go on to the afterlife and are turned into, monsters, there are many agents who choose, even when they cannot be resurrected, to remain in a spirit lantern. So there are entire groups of spirit lanterns in the agency that contain agents who do not necessarily want to be resurrected at the moment or can't be resurrected at the moment, but don't want to go to the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
So there are rows of lanterns that are containing these spirits that hope that you will be able to change something to make sure that their spirit can go on to a better place rather than this monstrous afterlife as it exists.
I was totally
really cool.
Picturing a spirit library before you even got to that point. I was like, wait, that could be malicious or benevolent. It also reminds me of real life, but like it reminds in this aspect, in the rich people wanting to never die. And so just like, hey, put me in cold storage until you can cure me.
Yeah.
So rift diving is one of the big mechanics in this. Obviously, getting from world to world you roll a dice and you divide by 2. That tells you how far you are from the world you're intending to go. Is there like situations where it becomes more randomized, like you don't successfully get to the world that you're attempting to get to, or how's that mechanic work within the game?
So for context, the agency only dives through gates. The Tori were created by the gods to make dimensional travel easy. You step through the gate, you appear in another dimension. However, that's not how everyone else traverses the mosaic. Yokai agents and members of the Hollow Eye Syndicate, which is a criminal syndicate of defected agents, rift dive. Rift diving relies on you tearing a hole in your reality, which extends through to your chosen reality, and then attempting to hurdle out of your world into the one you are aiming for. You have to make focus checks to stay on course and keep from witnessing the entirety of the mosaic, because this is the one place you can do that. Witnessing the entirety of the mosaic has detrimental effects on your character's mind that we talk about a little bit more in the core rulebook, but we talk about a little bit in the starter set. If you stay in the in-between too long, which is the space between dimensions, or fail enough focus checks, it's 3 rounds or 3 focus checks, you will slip out of the in-between because the human body is not meant to be in the space between worlds, so you gravitate towards other worlds. When that happens, the GM has carte blanche to put you in pretty much whatever world they want to.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And wherever they want to within that world. You could wind up falling back into 5th Street and landing in a train car and surprising a group of rail riders. You could fall into refuge and wind up falling into a nightclub or something. But regardless, you wind up somewhere.
It sounds like it's this thing. It's like, well, you've kind of decided to go against the rules in a bit. You're attempting something to jump into a world. Yeah, you can absolutely try that. Let's see how it goes. Rolls the dice. Oh, that's really far away. All right, run and jump, bud.
One of the fun things that you can encounter is that the yokai know that this is a problem for agents. The yokai will create a network of rifts through different dimensions. They will run to a rift, go through that rift, navigate through that world to another rift, with hopes that they will lose the tail by jumping through different dimensions.
That specifically sounds like a scene from Scooby-Doo. Where they're just like boom, boom, boom through all the doors and stuff, but instead it's just different dimensions. I think what's really fun for me about this setting is, I mean, there's gonzo settings where anything goes and you kind of lose a flavor. You know, like you start to lose any bearing on genre and reality. But what I think you've done really evocatively is you've put different genres in the different settings that are connected. But overall, you've got a very clear tone. We are playing as these ninjas. We are tapped into these powers. Our threat is consistently the yokai. They are doing these things. Like, we have things to hold on to at all times. It's not really anything goes, but within a very broad scope that you can still be very creative and do something fun, unique, and wild, especially when it comes to just like, I guess we're going to this separate dimension. That's something that can be either really terrifying as a game master or really freeing. So when it comes to the book and the support that it provides for all these different settings, let's say I'm running it. I've read through the book once, did a quick read, and I'm just going to run maybe 3 sessions with some friends. We built characters. I've got a plan. And then for some reason, it never happens. Everything goes wrong, and we end up in another reality I did not prep for. What are the kind of tools that are available in the Shadowscar book to make more unexpected arrivals in different realms a bit more, make them able to be pulled off in a casual way?
So every dimension gets its own chapter in the World Guide in the core book. We go through a pretty exhaustive deep dive into the history and the society and the technology of that world and all this stuff. We have at the back of every one of those chapters 2 aspects that were intended to give you touchstones.
Mm.
So there is the factions in that world, which gives you 4 different factions, what they're doing, what they want, who's running them, and then 2 pages of locations of interest.
Mm-hmm.
These are things like mysterious castles, secret factories, the secret hideouts of factions, things like that. There are, I believe, 20 in each setting that you can really quickly grab. They've got 1 or 2 sentences of description, but you can grab them and say, okay, if we're going to go to Steel Court, then this is where we're going to go. We're going to Dublin. Here's 3 sentences on what Dublin is like in Steel Court that I should be able to use to hang a plot line on.
Yeah.
We're going to Dublin. We're in Steel Court, and I will hang the current plot line on the Liberty Brotherhood or the Liberty Fellowship, which is a rebellion sort of anti-colonial faction spread across the Grand Victorian Empire. So you can kind of grab for those to give you very quick ideas of what you want to do.
That's awesome. Because that's always the pain point when you're jumping into a new setting, right? Like, especially when you have access to entire dimensions where it's like, oh man, I'm not. Like, I remember when I first accessed planar travel, in some games, and I'm like, let's go everywhere. And I just remember my game master's face just being like, huh? Okay. It's a lot to be able to do that because you're giving your players freedom, but you're also, in this case, like, I love it when there's really succinct top level stuff like you're describing in those sections where it's like, okay, I'm good enough at running games that I can just look at a list and be like, we're doing that. But if I don't have that list and I only have a whole wiki, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. I need the blue words on the wiki. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't just have a wall of text. So that is very exciting for me, being able to jump into try out the space in a casual way and know that I'm not going to end up in a place where it's like, okay, we're here because this one random magic item says we go to the astral plane, and I've never read anything about the astral plane, so I guess we're there, and now I need to do something.
No. The starter set is one really well put together. I really like everything that's included. It has tokens, different settings, pre-generated characters, and maps. That is great because it doesn't happen very often where a starter set is going to actually give me the maps to play on. So absolutely beautiful starter set. The dice having unique faces on them is like they're beautiful dice. It's probably, and it's one of my favorite starter sets that I've picked up in a while because of everything included in it. It really makes the game feel accessible.
You're going to make me blush.
Good. You deserve it.
I mean, when it comes to like a lot of more ambitious large projects, like the big games and like yours and Cyberpunk and so many of these games that have a storied history as well as a lot of crunch, a lot of options, a lot of book to read. I'm not per se somebody who just wants a casual experience. I love that level of detail. I also love playing zine games that are quick to just pick up and play. And I love when it becomes a priority for publishers and creators to make it possible to get in there, to try it out, to see if they like it, and to see if they want the big experience or if they just want a taste and want to stay there. Because I've played other starter boxes and been like, I don't know what I was playing. All I feel like I was doing was being advertised to buy a book. Instead of actually getting the full taste, it's just kind of an ad. And then I go, okay, well, if I do buy the book, then I feel like I wasted my money because I'm never going to use this again. So having those additional assets is such a pro-consumer move to make something that people are going to still enjoy having, even if they go and buy the book and still come back to use those assets.
When we were first putting this together, I set a 3-tier entry point. We have what I call our easy mode, Eyes in the Darkness, which is a free handout that gives you everything you need to play and basically 4 missions worth of content to show you all the worlds. So we hand that out to people if they have no idea. They don't want to spend any money. They just want to get an idea. Then there's the starter set, which gives you all the characters with character advancement, and then, more setting and more game to play. And then there will be core book. Because like I said, every dang day, I have beat the drum of I want this to be as accessible for people as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean,
So
pre-gens are... I've had a weird relationship with pre-gens over the years because I remember early on in games, I think the first time that I picked up a box set and messed around with pre-gens was probably the Numenera starter set for the Cypher system. And I picked up these and I'm like, I don't want these, and like threw them. And then I'm like, I'm just going to make my own. I'd never ran the system before. And it was so deeply overwhelming. I still did it because I was like, I don't want no pre-gens. But I love when games put a emphasis on a pre-gen, not just existing for accessibility purposes, but also giving them a little bit of story, a little bit of grit to tie them to the setting beyond just like, here's a bunch of numbers written down for you so you don't have to write them down yourself. Can you tell about what your approach to the pre-gens was and what jumping into these stories looks like if you sat down today to play this game? We talked about the different types of ninjas you could be, but when it comes to character creation, are we talking about a lot of stats? Are we talking about tons of abilities, tons of advancement, or what level of grit does it get into on these starter sheets?
So we're trying to put together the pre-gens. I wanted to give, obviously, every world should be represented. Every one of the shinobi clans should be represented because there are class equivalents, basically.
Right.
So I mixed and matched those, as it were, and then built those characters using the character creation that I have access to, and tried to build interesting characters that had interesting background. So, in building out these characters, the focus was on giving a short intro to the character's background that should give you an idea of who they are, what they want, and how you should play them. Then to build around that, build their stats and skills to facilitate that. The game is heavy on abilities. I am the type of game master and player that I like having more abilities than having more stats and skills. Things that I can do are more interesting than having numbers for how good I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You determine statistics. It's mind, body, spirit. 3 statistics. And then you have some sub-statistics for vitality and stuff like that. Then there's 18 skills. Just those 18 skills and those 3 statistics. And everything else is abilities that you get through your clan, homeland abilities you get from where you come from, Mikyo that you can learn, advantages and disadvantages that you can take for your character at the beginning of character creation. All these things, hopefully, continue to tell the story of your character.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of how character creation can truly be the catalyst for a deeper story. The creation, it's like, let me just look at the options, and then you see something and you're like, wait a sec, why would I have this ability? What would it mean if I have this ability? How does this tie to the setting? One of the biggest things that gets me excited about this is knowing how much the mechanics are tied to that setting, which pushes you deeper into it rather than, I have a fireball.
Yeah.
Fireballs are great, but why?
When you get to full character creation, we have a life path, because we always have a life path in all of our games. Make a few rolls, you can determine things about your character's background, what their family was like, who they were influenced by as a child, what the high points in their life have been, all this sort of stuff to help you build that story around the character.
When we were at Gen Con, I believe that the starter set was only available at Gen Con at that point. Is it out now?
Yes.
It is? Okay, cool.
It is available on our website for sale and should be hitting store shelves.
Very cool.
I hope they enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been an absolute pleasure, Cody. If people want to check out Shadowscar and your games, will have links in the description below. Again, thank you. Anything you want to shout out here at the end before we close?
I've spent 1 billion years working on the core book for Shadowscar, coming out later this year.
Hell yeah.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
If you like what we're doing here, please check out oneshotstavern.com, where you can follow us on all of our socials, as well as checking out our Patreon and my Start Playing Games profile. Until next time, see ya.